digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to the Digital Jam Sessions. Today we're going to be continuing the previous session, which included Zoe from Software UK, Paul from Stripe Media, and Imre from Bossa Studios.
So hello, I'm Zoe. I do all kinds of different things, so I'll try and give you the short version, but maybe it's also relevant in terms of talking about how digital is going across all of our lives now in so many different areas. So I started straight out of university as a coder with software technology where I still work. And then because when I started we were a really small company, I basically moved around and did loads of different jobs as well as being a coder. And then in 2012, I was appointed as MD, which is what I do now. Outside of software, I've done all kinds of different things. I hosted a radio show for unsigned bands, and we use the digital platform Mixcloud to share that out afterwards. And in fact, a lot of local and community radio is now being really empowered through technology in a way that things have become so much cheaper to make. I do presenting and hosting again on videos, and video has obviously exploded recently.
Stripe Media is we're an independent production company, and we like to say we make films for business. So I suppose in the old money we would be what you call a corporate film company, but we really don't like using that term because so much of what we do doesn't fit into the sort of traditional image of what being corporate, what corporate film actually is. And I think, as Zoe's just said, film has kind of exploded. Film, video, online video has absolutely exploded.
And Imre, please explain to those of us who are not gamers or in the gaming world, what is Bossa Studios?
Hi, Bossa Studios is a fairly young studio. We're 4 years old, and we make video games and all sorts and all kind of video games. We are probably most known two comedy games we did, one called Surgeon Simulator and the other I Am Bread, which is as silly as it sounds based on the title, because you are playing the role of a slice of bread. Yes, I know. Besides being a founder of Bossa Studios, I am also quite active in various support functions in getting youngsters into STEM education in general, and in particular, I am the committee member of BAFTA Games.
But I am curious to hear your points of view on what we think is going to be the future of kind of storytelling across multiple platforms and multiple devices. We've got this kind of things like GoPro as for example, taking us to another step in terms of easy, affordable, accessible filmmaking. But what about in terms of game development and where we're headed with devices and consumption habits for gaming? Do we think that there is something that's going to kind of make it more affordable, more easy for people to consume game content?
Well, I mean, it's worth noting that a smartphone is a fairly standard thing to happen nowadays, especially in the Western Hemisphere. And basically, if you have a smartphone, you have access to games. So I think access to content is fairly easy. Obviously, if someone wants to go for the highest of highest, AAA big budget, that probably requires a couple of £100 investment to get the console or PC to be able to play that. But I think what's more important here is that, and this is what's important to me in cross-media from a game perspective, is that the amount of layered content that we have, beyond what we mentioned earlier, one of my favorite is esports. When people start digging deeper in that and realizing that the audience and the online viewership of major gaming esport events are matching the NFL or NBA, that usually comes as a huge shock to people who are not in the games industry, and it's kind of like was an open secret. And then suddenly you realize that the whole industry is building around effectively handling competitive video game playing like any other sport, and they create the same star culture, they create the same commentary and the same production values. Now you can see with some of these major events. So I think the beauty is that how many new ideas people can come up with. And again, that's what I'm hoping, that TV, film, radio, music, everyone else will realize that they can break new grounds, and they can reinvent themselves.
So what about new technology though, Imre, in terms of things like the Oculus Rift, for example, or we're going to be seeing the Microsoft HoloLens, or Sony's whatever their headset is called these days. There's a lot of different new technology that's kind of coming up along the pipeline here that really, first of all, you need to be kind of at least a good-sized studio to want to develop for that platform in the first place. But second of all, there's obviously this issue of people aren't really going to get these things in their hands. I mean, the one that's most accessible at the moment is still Android's Cardboard, in terms of, having VR experiences. Do we think that this is something that is going to continue to become a trend, or do we think that it's limited by the fact that there is this kind of restriction in terms of who can really get involved?
I am obviously not the right person to ask because I'm hugely biased towards VR. I've been a big fan of VR since the 90s. It's definitely true that we have a breakthrough and we have technology coming around from multiple providers. Obviously, the biggest one, the Sony Morpheus, the Oculus Rift, and now the HTC Vive in collaboration with Valve. All of these devices are just, it's an arms race, and one is getting better than the other. And I'm quite convinced that new types of content will come out, not just games, but film, music video, etc. In fact, it is a known fact that all of these projects are happening. Having said that all, I am a little bit cautious with my projections of how widespread these things are going to be, because at the end of the day, it is still a bit of a dorky headset you have to put on, and it is still a bit clunky. So my view on this is that it will be a bit of a niche, at least for a while.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Imre, in terms of, we saw what happened with the Google Glass, and walking around with one of those on your head was a little bit of a challenge, shall we say.
But there must be some excitement about it. I mean, I'm just sort of thinking, I have to admit here to being a bit of a non-gamer, but something Emery said really made me think about the fact that actually I never really used consoles to play games. I think it's slightly, I've dabbled with Tekken 2 at university, and that was about it. But actually, smartphones have made me and a lot of people who aren't gamers as such obsessed with playing games, and also opened up to people who are much older than you would traditionally imagine your gaming market to be. And all you have to do is ride on the tube and see people in their 70s and 80s playing Candy Crush to know that. And I just, hearing you talking about it, Emery, just makes me think, actually, you're right. I can't see everybody suddenly donning Oculus Rift and overnight, but long term, there's got to be potential maybe for all sorts of people who would never imagine initially to be interested in these things to actually be drawn in by it, I would imagine.
Because I think that in some ways, if you look at technology, then you've got this logical trend, this logical conclusion towards this totally immersive kind of choose your own adventure VR world. But from my point of view, are we sure that it's really going to be better than just using fighting fantasy books?
Short answer, yes, it will be.
Imre is not biased in any way whatsoever, obviously.
Not at all. By the way, just a small side comment I forgot to say. When you said about high production value, it is worth noting that every single cool stuff you've seen in VR, and if you haven't, do try, are coming out from small studios. The HTC Vive demos, I don't think there have been a demo there which was created by more than maybe half a dozen people. And they create amazing content. And again, it is that you don't try to compete people on things. You can't compete with them, but you go in with something clever, with something which is different. But yes, it is. I am very cautious with this, and I don't think it's going to be a hugely widespread, democratized platform anytime soon. That is yet to be seen. Sometimes next year, I think we can make reasonable forecasts.
I tend to agree with you on that, Imre. But I wanted to follow up on something that Paul was saying and his comment about this kind of the behavioural trends, if you like, of how people are using technology. And this notion that actually now that most people have a smartphone, you know, we all have access to gaming. I find this interesting. I'm only bringing this up because I went to the cinema literally a couple of days ago, and somebody was actually watching. I kid you not, they're in the cinema, the film's about to start, the trailers are going. This person sat there with their tablet watching Netflix House of Cards before they're about to watch a movie. But the reason I bring this up is because I'm curious as to what we think the kind of behaviours and the trends are with people using multiple devices and using, you know, whether you call it second, third, fourth or multiple screening, whatever you call it, this way that we're changing the way that we interact with our technology and the way that we rely on the technology to consume the entertainment. Do you think that we're going to see more of this kind of shifting around of where we see the content on which device or which platform?
Well, I'm not totally sure, if I'm being honest. I think it's hard to predict. I know that television manufacturers have been frantically trying to, you know, regain the television status as the central entertainment hub of the house, and they're trying to do that by creating sort of smart TVs that control everything from your computing to your heating to your telecommunications to your, you know, and I'm only aware. It just makes me wonder whether I agree with you. I mean, obviously we're seeing diversification, and it never ceases to amaze me. Again, talking about commuting, to see the breadth in age and every aspect of people who are consuming like TV shows and films and games and whatever on all manner of devices on their commutes. But I can imagine a backlash against that, as it were, and then maybe a device will come along, you know, in the way that a smartphone has just centralized everything so effectively for so many things that we never dreamed we'd use our phone for. I wonder whether we might see eventually full circle a shrinking. This is hugely speculative on my part, but I can see how that would happen eventually, and maybe the television could kind of regain its status as the central hub of everything in our lives.
So, wow, Paul just totally agreed with me. I'm not just saying that because he spoke first. So I think that it's really, really hard to predict where we're going to be watching content without knowing what hardware innovations are going to come along. So, for example, if we were to see a kind of watch device take off, I think that would again change people's behaviour quite significantly. And I think that the trend that we're seeing is, again, exactly what Paul just said. We're seeing things that have a primary purpose that we need them for, and then we're repurposing that for a secondary purpose. So just to give an example of what I mean by that, I mean, we have a smartphone because we need it to use as a telephone, as a communication device. And then afterwards, we're using it as a secondary purpose, as a television screen or as a device for receiving video content. So I think I also agree with Paul. I'm going to have to find something to disagree with in a minute, but I also agree that a TV comeback is probably a bit of a long shot because the primary purpose isn't there anymore.
I mean, that makes sense. And obviously the other thing against the television, obviously it's too sedentary. It's too hard to move around. And I think exactly as you say, it's impossible to predict this, and I certainly wouldn't be the one to do so. But I pick that as an example because I know that television companies are trying to do exactly this at the moment, and I think it is. I mean, it's a tough question, Tanya. We'll have to, you know, you're asking us to predict the next major technology trend, but yeah, exactly. I think it will be exactly that. It'll be about something that can come along, has exactly something you need anyway, and suddenly is able to do so many more things for you. And the watch is going to be an interesting one, isn't it? Many people, for whatever reasons, really quite sort of random anecdotal reasons, aren't very pro this idea of the smartwatch. I mean, quite a lot of people just don't like wearing a watch, full stop, which is a sort of ridiculous first barrier. And there's a lot of I was thinking about that earlier when you were sort of thinking about where else are we going. I'm very conscious of one of the things about the Apple Watch is this idea of this almost instant real-time monitoring of all your personal health and body data. And I'm wondering whether there's going to be something within that can go into something like gaming. It was actually what I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about Oculus Rift and things like that, whether there's going to be a way that you can create sort of avatar characters that are based on your actual physical condition at that very time. There's just an idea I had.
Imre, what about you? Do you want to take that challenge from Paul? Create avatars that are based on our biological health?
I cannot confirm or deny at this point if Bossa Studios is working on a watch.
Excellent.
What I can tell you is that I would be very, very anxious and very nervous if I would be leading a business which primary purpose is hardware. The fact is that hardware is a very, very tricky field to be in because new ideas come along so fast that the bigger the hardware is, the bigger the piece of hardware is, the harder it is for you to keep up. And television is an excellent idea, an excellent example that how television manufacturers were struggling to keep up, and they were trying to add these kind of gimmicky things. And they say, okay, we're gonna get it back, and we're gonna own this again. But the fact is that why would I want to watch YouTube on my big telly via a clunky control if I already have multiple devices of mine? Many of them I can use to cast on my television screen. So even if I wanted it on a big screen, I can get it that way. It is really tough. It is really tough for them. But again, the wonderful thing is that the power started to go back towards the people who create stuff, who create content, film, short film, game, radio shows, whatever it is. And that is hugely, I think this is a brilliant time. This is the golden era for content creation. And I'm just hoping that what we see, all the positive in each individual field, they will cross-pollinate and we will all learn from each other. And then ultimately, the hardware manufacturers will catch up and will keep up with that. Just one example I'm going to say, and obviously I'm going to give you a gaming example, is the fact that in the last 10 years, 10 years ago, there was no Facebook, there was no iPhone, there was no Twitter, there was no any of these things. But if you look back now and you see that when Facebook started, they didn't take gaming seriously, and they had to scramble to catch up with the need and the amount of money which was possible to be made. The same happened with Apple's App Store. When it first appeared, they did not realize that basically the vast majority of their income is not going to come from functional applications, but games. And what it is that suddenly is a wake-up call, and these companies luckily reacted fast, and they said, okay, I have to adapt around what my users want. So hopefully TV companies can wake up as well, but I think they are not going to dictate content anymore. Similarly, how mobile network providers are not in charge of content anymore like they were 20 years ago, but it is the power back to the people who create the actual content.
So I have a question for you, Imre, which is if we think this is all about kind of putting creative control and power back into the hands of creators and content creators. First of all, I'll explain for everybody so you all know what we're talking about here. What I want to understand, Imre, is what your view is on game academies. And game academies, for those who don't know, are basically schools, secondary schools, that teach the national curriculum as normal, but they actually have integrated within their national curriculum teachings the fundamental basics of how to build games and how to code games and how to deliver game products. So that actually by the time these kids have finished secondary school, not gone to college or university here, but just finished secondary school, they'll have already had the experience of building and publishing their own games. And I wonder how you feel about this, Imre, in terms of, do we think that this is the way forwards for cultivating higher quality content creators?
That is a very difficult question, because of course there are, for any subject, you're going to find great courses and bad ones. And I guess the same is true for film or what have you. It is true that there is less of an elitism about this. It's not that, oh, if you didn't make it into that super particular school, then you're never going to make it. Whilst if you did that, then you're going to know the secret handshake, and suddenly all these buddies are going to get you jobs for the rest of your life. I think the wonderful thing is, and I think this is what I hope will spread, is that events and organizations like the Girl Geek dinners and many of these initiatives. What's wonderful is that they make that age range, these are typically under 16, realize that they can actually create this content. It's not blocked out of them. And I'm hoping that the next generation of game makers, filmmakers, music artists will come from that audience who understand in a very natural way what content is needed to be made, because they're not the old dinosaurs like I am. So these courses are great, and there are some really good ones, of course. But to me, the most important fact here is that even without formal education, someone can pick up today enough to get them started. It is definitely true in gaming, and I hope it will be true, or might already be true, in other areas as well.
I definitely think there's some facilitation there in terms of the technology now being really in anybody's hands. I mean, let's face it, even with a smartphone, if you really wanted to, you could shoot a film and edit a film and even publish a film straight out of your smartphone. So I think definitely the potential there. But in closing, folks, what I would love to hear from you is if there is a specific project, a specific technology, device, thing that you want to share with the world. This is your moment. Tell us all about that awesome, cool, wonderful thing that we need to know about. Zoe.
I've been sitting here feeling really smug because I actually predicted in front of a live audience at this awesome event called Science Show Off that the demise of Google Glass versus Apple Watch, and that putting things in front of your eyes just wasn't a great idea at all. However, I did find an email from, I don't know, must be several years ago now, 5 years maybe, where I told everyone how Google Wave was going to be awesome and was going to be the next best thing. Does anyone remember Google Wave?
Yeah. I
actually
Google
loved
Wave.
Google Wave, and I was crying when it went away.
We're not old. None of us are old, really. Promise.
No. So in terms of things I'm using now, I mean, it's quite interesting talking about the biological data because I've got a jawbone and there are a few things that could be improved about it, but I'm starting to see how a watch is perhaps even more plausible than I'd previously thought in terms of all the different things it could do. And I do remember, again, back to not being old, but I do remember the day that I actually convinced myself that I needed a smartphone. And it was when I realized it could replace every single thing I had in my handbag. So it could replace a dictionary, it could replace an A to Z, it could, all of these things suddenly.
How big was your handbag, Mrs.?
Yeah. I didn't actually carry a dictionary. I just wanted to, and then a smartphone could do it, so it was all okay. Replacing books as well has been a massive, big deal for me. Being able to have, carry 20 books in one tiny tablet. I mean, how awesome is that? So I'm actually starting to see that there are so many possibilities with the watch, and I think it could be really awesome. So fingers crossed they deliver on it. Apple, come on, deliver.
Convert to the watch. Okay. You heard it here first. Zoe believes in the watch. Paul, what's your thing? What do you think is the big thing we should all know about?
Well, you probably do all know about it, but I wasn't expecting this opportunity, but I'd like to, something I'm very into is drones or UAVs. So I get my opportunity to have a soapbox now. Obviously, you're all aware of them. I've obviously got involved with them for filmmaking purposes, and I've just actually last week qualified as a pilot through what was actually a really rigorous testing course that you go through, both in terms of theory and flight testing. So I just want to make the case for UAVs and just say that I think they have the potential to be a huge force for good in the world. They're obviously fantastic for filmmaking, for adding production value. They have so many other uses. I think the whole kind of Amazon Prime, them flying around dropping boxes in your back garden is a fantasy. But I think they have fantastic other uses in terms of medical, in terms of delivering things to people in places where they can't get them, but also for things like agriculture. I'm sure, I don't know if you're aware, but they're fantastic. You can be fitted with all sorts of different sensors and cameras to do things like scan fields for irrigation, to ensure that farmers only need to use pesticides or water fields in specific places where the crops actually need it. So there's huge opportunities for all sorts of efficiencies through drones.
I have to say, Paul, I do know a little bit about this, and there's actually a really interesting business out of the most recent oxygen accelerator incubator out of Google campus, who's using drones specifically as a life-saving device. So rather than sending a lifesaver to go swim out into the sea to go rescue somebody, they actually just send a drone that's carrying the lifebelts and can target the lifebelts to drop them over these people, and the drones are capable of being shipped onto big ships that are out in the middle of the sea and be able to be the equivalent of a lifeboat essentially.
Absolutely, and I don't know about that particular project. That sounds amazing. I know there's what I can't remember if it's in Germany or in Holland. Somebody's developed one that carries a defibrillator, so that and can be summoned within minutes to somebody who's had a heart attack or something similar like that. There's all sorts of fantastic uses for them. I suppose what I'm saying is I'm hugely in favour of regulation for drones. I think it's really important. I understand kind of public concerns about privacy and about safety. But it frustrates me the way the media just chooses to sensationalise them so much, whilst at the same time frantically putting any imagery they can find that looks spectacular from a drone up anywhere. So I just want to make the case for them, say, I think drones are good. I think they could be a big part of our future when they're used sensibly. I think, similarly, very different, but similarly to like Google Glass, people don't want to walk around with a piece of glass in front of their face. People don't want to walk around with drones flying around over their heads all the time. But used sensibly and sparingly, I think they could be a major part in the next 5-10 years.
I sense another digital jam session coming up in the future about drones. Imre, what's your thing that you want to tell us all about?
Honestly, we covered so many cool stuff from VR to smartwatches to drones to whatnot. I think, to me, my comment is more generic. It's not a specific device. It is the fact that technology and science education needs to catch up with the demand what we have. And if I have to talk about one specific tool, that's not a hardware device, but rather the idea that the vast majority of human knowledge is available at our fingertips, and most of it for free. And this is the time for creators, and this is the time to reinvent ourselves. I heard for many years that the geeks will inherit the earth, and I think we already did. So to me, the big news is that we just need to create content, because it's never been this easy to create and share it with others.
This is so very, very true. And very, very briefly, before we finish, I'm going to ask each of you to shout out your relevant Twitter handle, pretty please. Sorry.
Zoe F. Cunningham.
Paul.
Stripe Media.
Imre.
At Imre Jele.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for listening to Digital Jam Sessions. And remember, if you want to catch any of these lovely people, you can just follow them on their relevant Twitter handles. Subscribe today at digitaljamsessions.com. digitaljamsessions.com